I want to start with a story about my dad. My dad was 17 years old, and he was about to graduate from high school. He enlisted in the United States Navy. It was a good move for him. He stayed there for 20 years, and until a friend of his retired from the Navy, went to work for a hospital, and asked him to come work for the hospital. So he just basically showed up at the hospital and started working, stayed there another 25 years until he retired from pretty much everything, and moved to Florida. That happened a lot in my dad's generation. Doesn't happen a whole lot now. People staying in the same place for 20, 25 years, especially in the IT industry. There's a lot of reasons for that, but there's one of the scariest things, I think, is for a lot of people, is going through the job search process. And I remember when I graduated from college, I asked my dad if he could give me any advice, and he was unable to. He had never experienced what it was like to go find a job. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are thinking about changing careers, and they don't really know how to go about that. They think about changing jobs, and changing companies. And I don't know that colleges are really preparing people for that either. So what we've done here today is we've brought some people that have recently gone through job searches. We've got some people who are on the hiring side of things, that are responsible for interviewing, recruiting, and hiring people. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that process is like and how they went through it. And hopefully at the end of it, anybody that watches this will be better prepared to go through that process themselves. So we've got here, I'll introduce real quickly, James Bender, Todd Eglin, Jay Harris, Diane Sanders, Jeff McWhorter, and John Keller. And go ahead, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, please, James.
Okay, so my name is James Bender. As Dave said, I'm the Principal Technology Manager for the SOFA Group out of Columbus, Ohio. I guess why I'm on this panel today is I went through a job change about a little over a year ago. And in my capacity at SOFA Group, I'm also in charge for some of the hiring line recommendations as far as hiring, recruiting, and keeping our pipeline of consultants full. So.
Great. As introduced, I'm Todd Englund. I work for a company called Tellerick, which some of you may have heard of. I'm chief evangelist there, and so I'm involved in the hiring process. But also, I'm president of the North Houston .NET User Group, and so we very often talk about the challenges of finding jobs and how do you be a good job candidate in this .NET market. So I bring that perspective to the panel as well.
I'm Jay Harris, independent software consultant with my own business, Arana Software. I've been through 2 job changes in the past 2.5 years. Now, additionally, with my primary client, Velasas, the coupon company, not the pickle company, I am involved with their hiring process.
Hi, my name is Diane Sanders, and I'm the co-owner of an IT staffing firm here in the Nashville area, Alltech. I'm also the president of the Tennessee Recruiters Association and a certified personnel consultant. So I deal with people on both sides, those that are hiring and those that are looking for work.
My name is Jeff McWhorter. I am a partner and director of development at Gravity Works Design and Development, a consulting shop up in Lansing, Michigan. And I guess I would be on the hiring side. In the past 6 months, we've hired 5 developer, designers, content people. So I bring that to the table, and I think also James and I have had numerous conversations throughout the years about interview questions, who we would hire out of the community, that sort of thing. So I think that'll be good banter back and forth.
I'm John Keller. I am a developer and architect with Teradyne out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I'm also put on a little conference called DevLink. I've worked as a consultant and as a developer full-time and done job changes ever since I got out of the Navy. Just a few, but I've done a lot as a consultant, obviously. You go from job to job, looking at the right clients, taking the right jobs. So I've also worked on the hiring side as well, being team lead and bringing people on board and asking the right questions, make sure they're great fits. So, and I'm probably one of the, other than maybe Dave, older people that are on the stage. So we'll move along.
Great, welcome guys. So we've got people here from, we talked about both sides, but it's really not both sides because a lot of people have gone through the job search and they're part of the hiring process. But I've got a question for people who have gone through the job search. How do you know when it's time to look for a job, other than you just got fired and you can pay the rent? How do you know when it's time to change? James?
So my story might be a little different from most people's. Dave and I worked for a company out of Columbus, Ohio, that went through some significant culture changes. I've worked for a couple consulting firms before, and one thing I've noticed is there seems to be this magic number, 250. When you have 250 billion consultants, the culture, for whatever reason, maybe coincidence, maybe by design, maybe because of the number of consultants you have there now, the culture undergoes a change. And sometimes that change is good, sometimes it's not. What I found myself in a situation was, I was going through a company that was going through a very negative culture change at the time. Negative from my point of view. And what I did was, I kind of said, well, I don't really want to be here anymore. I want to go find something else. I mean, the grass is always greener. And so what I kind of did was, and I still had a job at the time, and people say it's easier to find a job when you have a job. That's not necessarily always true, because it's a lot harder looking for a job when you don't want your current employer to know that you're looking for a job, especially if you're involved in the community. There tends to be grapevine, people tend to talk. But what I did was, this is maybe a good statement on the strength of the community. I talked to people I knew worked for companies, and I talked to people I knew who worked for companies who were looking for someone with my skills, somebody with my ambition, somebody who needed somebody to do what I wanted to do. And it wasn't a fast process. I mean, it took better part of a year, but ultimately I met up with the right people, the guys over the Sofa Group, one who's in the audience right now, Daniel. And we talked, and I kind of explained what I was looking for, and they explained what they were looking for, and it just happened to work out. I was a match for what they needed. And you kind of know the end of the story. I left, I took the job there. But it was a long process, and I was at the point where I could be a little bit picky. I had a job, so I didn't have any real pushing me to leave. I was getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. But at the same time, I had to be very cautious about how I looked, how I made sure people knew I was looking. Because if my company had found out I was looking, that could very quickly change. So.
I'd like to tackle, so as far as your question, just refresh me on your question, it was, how do you know when it's time to leave? So I've heard a lot of people say it's when you get up in the morning and you don't want to go to work. Sometimes that's more of an attitude change and a problem on your part that you need to work on. I think if you can't feel the contribution that you're giving to the company is any good, if you don't feel like you're actually delivering anything, then your time has come. And you need to start finding either other ways you can contribute to the company, or make that decision and say, I need to start looking at something else. So that's, I think it's going to be different for everybody. Mine is going to be contribution based. So.
I think another thing was, you have to look at is, what does your future look like in that company? I mean, ideally, we all want to keep growing. We wouldn't be at this conference if we were satisfied just working 8 to 5 o'clock on a paycheck and having that be our existence. We want to know that we're going to have an opportunity to grow and move ahead. And at some point, the company may be fine, but you may find that your opportunities at that company are stunted, and you may have pretty much topped out at where you're at for whatever reason. That might be another sign that it's time to start looking for somewhere else where there might be better opportunities.
Okay, so let's assume that you made the decision you're going to start looking for a new job. This is a question for anyone. Where do I start? Do I send out blind resumes and cover letters? Do I look at the classified ads? Do I look on Monster? Or what?
Coming from the recruiting industry, I feel pretty strongly that the best time to look for a job is when you have one. And the best time to do that is before you get disenamored with where you're at, because then your attitude does suffer, even if you don't think it does. Your body language changes. So probably the best thing to do, even if you're happy at your job, network outside of where you're at. Don't get boxed in and only know the people in that one area. Find out, do research in your area, find a couple of good recruiters that you can trust that are going to treat you right. They're not going to send your resume places without your permission. They're going to get to know you and what you want in your career, so that if they have an opportunity, they can contact you. But every time they get a job that says .NET, they're not just picking up the phone and calling you. So to me, that's the best way to start out. It's a lot of times it's not what you know, but who you know.
That kind of goes with the whole community thing. I mean, the stronger and the more familiar with the local development community, that they're going to know who's looking, they're going to know who's hiring, and they're going to know what jobs and what companies are maybe a good fit for you and which ones aren't.
Along the same lines, I agree. I would put it as, it's always the right time to look for a job. I never stop looking for a new job. It may not always be an active job search, but it's at least always in a passive job search. You know, if I was an airplane pilot, and the only job I could get would be, I don't know, crop dusting fields. If one day NASA came along and said, "Hey, you want to be an astronaut?" Of course, I'm going to take it. So those passive searches, just always keeping your ears out for newer opportunities, better opportunities, keeping in touch with your recruiters, with your community, and it also helps with your networking because someone can come to me and say, "Hey Jay, I have this really great opportunity for a new position. Are you interested?" Maybe I'm not at that time, but I can also say no. But I know these 3 other people that might be interested, and it's great for your networking opportunities.
And I'd like to just add to that, you know, James mentioned community. Community is not something that you say, okay, I need a job, I'm going to go to the user group and pop in and say, hey, anybody got any job openings? That's not community. Community is building those relationships beforehand, so you already have a conversational tone. You can say, I'm really looking for something, anybody know of an opportunity? And that's when you've already built those relationships with recruiters, you've already built those relationships with community members, and you can really lean on people to find those things.
So I would agree as well in echoing the idea of community and networking. It means everybody who's here, you're doing great things just by being at an event like this. And in fact, I'd suggest that at events like this, even more valuable than the nuggets you take away from the great sessions here, are the time you spend talking to other attendees in the hallways or in the open spaces. That ultimately will be more valuable to you in your career than often what a speaker has to say, as great as all the speakers here are. But be plugged into your .NET user groups. Be plugged into all the things that give you opportunities to network at all times, because that will be that network you go back to when you do find the need to look for a job. And to add to that sort of question, where do I begin? It's important to understand what kind of jobs you like. There are very different types of companies. There's consulting, there's product companies, there's enterprise, there's small business. And if you know from your past experience that you fit a certain type of puzzle better than others, look in that direction first, because that's ultimately going to probably make you happier when you do find an opportunity. It's no sense going down the road to something you know leads to unhappiness if you've already tried that. So keep that in mind as well.
Of the 5 people we hired in the last 6 months, all of them came from the community.
I want to pop one more thing on here. So the other thing is, you ask, where do you start? You can look on Monster, you can look on those things, but you can start with things like LinkedIn, you can start with things like Monster. Those are going to tell you what people are looking for. They're not necessarily going to tell you the best jobs that are out there. You're going to get that from your network. So.
They were talking about community and like Alltech is a sponsor of DevLink. And I mean, we do it to help support the community so that education can be brought to the area for the developers. But it's also a networking event for us and for the DevLink attendees. And like I had someone come up to me today and I said, oh, can I scan your badge? And he's like, why? What are you going to do with it? I'm like, you're going to need a job one day. I'm just here to help. And I know some recruiters kind of go a little overboard, but I mean, take a card, file it away somewhere. You never know when you're going to need it. And if you just call up a recruiter and say, hey, I'm not looking right now, but I have a couple of questions. If that person's going to spend the time to talk to you when they know you're not actively seeking a job, that's the kind of recruiter you want to work with when you are actively seeking a job, because they genuinely care about what you want to do and helping you find a position, just not, can I make a deal right now?
Recruiters are fantastic people to get in touch with for keeping that passive job search going, in addition to just the other developers in the community. Especially helpful when something comes up and you find yourself needing an immediate opportunity. When you get fired or laid off, you got downsized. A nice little secret, recruiters love to take you out to lunch, and they don't have to pay for it. They can expense it against their company. So I would also recommend, maybe at least once every quarter, keep in touch with your local recruiter, have them take you out to lunch, you get a free lunch out of it, and exactly. Because at the same time, when a new opportunity comes along that might be a perfect fit for you, you want them to be thinking of you first before anybody else that's in their Rolodex of developers.
So if you learn nothing else at DevLink this week, if you can get $100 of free lunches, the conference is paid for itself.
The other value of being involved in community and events like this, and that just to kind of touch on what John said, when you need a job, it's not the time to get involved because it's too late at that point. I'm engaged in a lot of the hiring activity at SOFIC. If I know somebody who's in the community, well, that tells me two things about them. Well, first of all, obviously, I've met them in the community, so I know who they are. I can put a face to them. It's not just a anonymous resume coming across my desk. But if you're here, you've obviously seen the value in your time, investing your time and in some cases your money to attend events like this, and you show that you're invested enough in yourself and your career to try to make yourself better. And as a person who is hiring, that's incredibly attractive to us because I want somebody who's passionate. I want somebody who understands the value of always improving themselves.
Let me put this up real quickly. I keep hearing that networking is the best way to find a job. And nobody's mentioning the way that I got my first job, which is I looked for the want ads and I wrote down those addresses and I mailed resumes and I mailed line cover letters to companies hoping that they would hire me. Is that effective at all? Is there any point in doing that?
I think that networking in this case is just sort of the starting point. I mean, it's making that effort of sending out those resumes and sending out those queries for jobs. It's just giving you a better chance of success in finding things that are best matched to your both ability and what your interests are. It's targeted, as you suggested. So I don't think that necessarily goes away. And certainly if you have no network, then you are going to be forced to maybe take a little bit more of an uphill battle in doing more cold calling. But that network is simply going to help you find success faster and perhaps find a job that's going to reward you more for your skills and for your experience than you would if you're just doing a plain cold call.
As a company, we receive lots of unsolicited resumes, emails, and people even off the street coming in and looking for jobs. And being a smaller company and focusing on community, we're looking for the shiny penny, the needle in the haystack. So we, as a courtesy, tell people that even if it's just an email coming to us, we're not actively hiring right now, but you know what, if you're still interested, why don't you come in, let's talk, let's hang out, because you never know, maybe that person is the next best programmer, and we stumble upon them. So we do that when we get those blind things. I don't think a lot of companies do that. We're the exception. I think you're going to have more luck with a smaller company doing something like that, but I wouldn't give up hope with stuff like that.
Jeff, you mentioned standing out. As a job candidate, what can I do to stand out for an employer? Potential employer, I should say.
So before we move on to that question, I just wanted to let everybody know, we're gonna quit beating the dead horse of the networking because I think probably everybody gets it, but watching out for one another. Recently, we had an issue in Nashville where a company got shut down. A lot of people lost their jobs. The day that happened, there were phone calls, there were emails made because of Twitter posts that, oh, I'm out of a job and so forth like that. I was able to get two guys that are really top-notch developers, one directly and one because he recommended the other guy, and they're coming to work for us. And you know, it's just a great opportunity if you really build that network. You can help a lot of people besides just yourself, and that kind of stuff can come around and help you too. So as far as standing out, I think community is also another place where you can get that. Everybody here, sorry, Diane. Everybody here goes out and presents at user groups, goes out and presents at events like these. They strive to better themselves by learning a new technology or just taking new approaches to old ideas. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to make this better, I'm going to make this new. Those are great ways to get yourself recognized. They're also great ways to improve your technical ability, and both of those help you in any career search at all.
So I'll say from the hiring perspective, the people that I've interviewed and hired in the past, certainly people that stand out from the stack of resumes when going through the process, are people that show proactive involvement outside of their job hours, people that show involvement in learning new things that they're not required to learn to do their job. And when they can come to an interview and bring an example of some technology that they've learned and they've built some app on or some project they've been involved in, so-called extracurricular to their job, that speaks volumes more to me about their commitment, their ability to tackle a problem, their creative thinking than anything they can list in words on their resume. The resumes, you know, they start to look the same. Yeah, everybody can list C#, everybody can list this, that, the other. Everybody can pass a basic interview question about programming skills, and that really doesn't add up to much. So it's what you can prove that's actually been done over time that means more and makes you stand out more than just listing various skills. And that certainly is every person I've ever found that's succeeded and been great has had that to their credit in the interviewing process.
I'm going to start this flame war. Microsoft certifications. This is a very heated topic among people who are hiring. I once interviewed with somebody and I said, yeah, I'm a Microsoft solution developer. He said, yeah, we have a secretary who has that as well. I doubt that, but it's something to set you apart. It's something to look at. I'm going to look at that and know that you took the time to read a book, you know how to use the Visual Studio IDE. It's not the only thing I'm going to look at. I'm not going to hire you because you're an MCSD, but you know what? It's going to help in most situations, unless it's that one manager that told me that, it was a bad situation. But I think that's going to help in situations like that.
I'll actually agree with that. There are very few companies that won't hire you if you don't have a specific certification. But if you do, it does speak to your commitment to learning new things, staying up on technology. And if they've got 20 resumes in front of them and they're just trying to say, okay, I really don't want to read 20 resumes, 5 of these people have a certification, you know, they may pull those out of the stack and address those first. So I do think it's a good thing if it's something you're interested in to pursue.
Remember that your employer is responsible for your job, but you are responsible for your career. If you want to learn something about MVC, but your employer is purely a WinForms developer, it's not in their best interest to send you to ASP and MVC training. It's not something they do. They're not going to get any ROI on paying for you to get that training. But if it's something that you want to do, absolutely go out into the community, into events like these, read blog posts and listen to podcasts to learn about those new things. Because, as I said, your employer is only responsible for giving you the training that has a direct ROI in what they are in the business of doing. Anything beyond that, anything involving your career as a whole, is your responsibility.
Can you recommend a good podcast that they should listen to?
I want to have a dissenting opinion against, and you knew you were going to kick this off. So, certification is great if you personally feel like you need that. I don't think that you should, if you don't feel like you personally need to be certified, it does not make you an expert. It does not prove that you are technically skilled, because there's plenty of other people who have obtained those things through brain dumps and just places that turn out people with certifications. So I don't feel that it sets people apart necessarily. And I know a lot of people that feel the exact same way. They look at certification as, why did this person get it? I'm going to toss it out. Now, that may not be the case with everybody, but I do know there's a lot of hiring out there that looks at that as nothing. They just ignore it. So it's not the silver bullet.
Right, and I understand there's a lot of companies, especially, we do a lot of work with government and NGOs, and that's a requirement that somebody's figured out they need to have the certification. And I've been doing interviews for 7 years, and I get some resumes that look like you just took a Scrabble box out of their piece of paper, and it's just like, it's like an eye chart. And the thing people need to remember is, passing a certification does not make you a good developer. It just means you pass any test. And some of those certifications obviously have more value than others. But you can't just take a bunch of certification exams, list them on your resume, and consider yourself a good developer. You have to still go beyond that. Now, getting a resume, if we have a client that needs some certification, I'll give weight to that person because we need to get them in the door. But it doesn't mean that you're going to not be able to stand up and have to stand on your own 2 feet technically. You're still going to get grilled during the tech interview. You're still going to have to demonstrate your value. You can't just ride the certification course to the end of the finish line. You have to go beyond that.
I think I fall more in John's camp on certifications, and to that extent, I wouldn't say that they're a black mark on a resume, but if I were to see 2 people in front of me, one had a laundry list of certifications, or even a certification, and one had real demonstrable experience of working with technology, I'd go with the demonstrative experience every time over the actual letters next to the name. So having them in addition to experience, generally a wash maybe helps you in situations where there is filtering being done based on the certifications. I wouldn't say it as a blanket statement, but I would suggest sometimes use caution if you're looking at an employer who is only filtering certifications, because sometimes that means they don't fully understand what it means to be a good developer. You may not find that to be a great development environment for you as a creative .NET developer. But in general, the development world is very different than the IT Pro world, for instance. IT Pro or any of the fields where certifications are required often just to do the work you do. It's a much different thing that somehow drifted into software, and I don't think carries as much weight for software shops that truly understand what it takes to be a good developer. So I would just weigh that, and when given the opportunity to invest your time, if it's a trade-off between taking a test and practically doing something that you can demonstrate, do something first. Take the test second.
I think everybody's in agreement that it's not a silver bullet, it's not going to get you a job, but it's not going to be a black mark. But the thing that people don't think about too is smaller companies need people that have Microsoft certs to get Microsoft certified partner and gold partner, and it's difficult for me to be a gold partner when I'm the only one who has 15 certs. Now, it doesn't matter about the skills of the company. I want to be a gold partner because that shows to clients that that's something that clients think about, not developers, not anything. It's the clients at that point that see that and think that Microsoft Gold Partner means that Microsoft actually came to our office and did something, when it really doesn't, but it's that illusion that we really know what we're doing. And I would say, all things being equal, James and Jay, if one of them had a cert, I would hire them over the person with not having it.
I'm sort of somewhere in the middle on this cert versus no cert thing. I'm with Jeff on the certifications for the partnership. Becoming a Microsoft certified partner is my only reason, really, personally, for getting the Microsoft certifications. But those certifications are great at giving you the technical knowledge of how to properly use threading, let's say. But what the certifications don't give you is the experience to know when to use some particular style of threading versus the others. I put that in the same camp as even a master's degree in computer science. And many times, even a bachelor's degree in computer science. I know many phenomenal developers that are far smarter than me when it comes to programming that have no official college endorsement at all.
Can I follow up on that? How many of the employers here think that a college degree in computer science or a college degree at all is a prerequisite to employment?
I'll say a college degree, it doesn't matter what it's in.
So a college degree is important to you. Why is that?
Reading and writing. I've hired, you laugh, honestly, I've hired people who only have a high school diploma and somebody out of college, and you can tell in the emails their grammar, the spelling, the different things, and working with clients, all that sort of jazz. There's a huge difference.
Okay, now a college degree is a lot harder to get than passing one certification test, but it does have some value. In your opinion.
I don't, insofar as certain clients will require a college degree, I care about it in that regard. Beyond that, it's not a huge thing for me. If they can demonstrate they're able to communicate well, and they demonstrate they're able to develop well, that's fine. And actually, in my experience doing interviews, I think there's a pendulum that starts moving the other way, especially when you're talking about business development. People with masters in computer science and people with PhDs, they actually interview worse with me because they don't understand what the business world is really like. If they're behind on a project, if their work isn't supporting their thesis, well, I'll just talk to my prof, I'm going to change my due date, I'm going to change my thesis. That doesn't work with the business world. They have a hard time relating to hard deadlines, and they need to get things done and produce results. And for the most part, a lot of those guys, when I talk to them, it's just clear they're really not cut out for what we want. They'd be great academics and great researchers, but when a business needs a system to process credit cards, that's just not really what their strengths are.
I'll say too that a lot of employers, clients, when they send us job recs and it says it's required, we really quiz them on that. Are you sure? Because there's a certain number of people that you're going to cut out of the search at that point. A lot of them look at it not from the standpoint of what did you necessarily learn, but you made a commitment and you did it. So it's a kind of a goal setting thing. If you commit to something, are you going to follow through and finish it? Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's time consuming, whatever the case may be. So sometimes look at it like that, not just from the standpoint of is it a degree and what degree is it, because they really don't care as far as that goes.
I think experience, again, is the great equalizer here, and being able to demonstrate that will help make up for it. And I've hired people in the past that don't have college degrees and have outstanding experience that overcome that. But I will say that almost without a doubt, regardless of whether or not you get the job or not having a college degree will impact the salary and the benefits often that you're offered. So you can get the job, but it's probably going to be for less money than you would if you had that college degree. And that's just because of the way salary reports are run, the fact that when you have these salary benchmarks and you have to have this need to reward people for the effort and experience they bring to the table, you've got to recognize the value of a college degree in that. So it will, I think, across the board impact what you make, but it may not impact whether or not you get the job.
So, not having a college degree, I find I can articulate okay. Sometimes. You never know.
You talk pretty good.
This is a hot point for me, just because I find that I've met a lot of people that come out of college, and they're just as dumb as when they left high school. And they can't spell, they can't write, they can't put together a business proposal, they can't do anything. At the same time, you find people who still want those people because they say, oh, well, they have a piece of paper that says they paid a lot of money, partied for 4 years, got straight C's, but they got a diploma that says you're intelligent. Whereas you've got a lot of people out there who are just intelligent by default, right? Just people that, 14 years old, they're writing the same level of code as a lot of people up here. Or you've got people that go to the military and spend 4 years there, not partying, but working their butt off and learning how to communicate and learning those things, which is where I came from. I started in the United States Navy. So for me, I think a college degree is valuable, and I agree 100% that you're right, salary is definitely impacted by that. But I don't think it makes someone a better person from a reading and writing perspective. I think a lot of those are just natural skills, and college doesn't necessarily teach that to everyone.
And just to support John's point, I don't have a degree myself. And my view is a little different. I kind of had the realistic economy view. I took all my computer science classes. I really didn't want to take geometry. I really didn't want to take astronomy. No one to this day has asked me the difference between an igneous rock and a sedimentary rock. So I think everything worked out okay. I think I communicate pretty well. I think it's more important that you hire somebody, again, who's got the aptitude and the mentality to be a developer. And kind of to your point, Doug, I agree when you're talking about large companies to maybe the large and medium-sized companies, that does factor in whether they have a degree or not. But that's strictly because somebody somewhere has an algorithm to determine how much you get paid, and they flip a bit somewhere that says, yes, they have a degree. Medium to smaller sized companies, for instance, our companies, the company I work for, we pay you what we think you're worth. We pay you based on what we feel you can accomplish and what you have accomplished. And if you have a degree, that's great. For the most part, I care about what you're going to do today, not what you did 5, 6, 7 years ago. Unless it was illegal. Then that's another issue.
Okay, we've got a comment from a troublemaker in the audience.
Well, I just want to say that we hire a lot of people at our company. Sometimes, sometimes we make the wrong decision, but generally, you find that people, we do filter a lot of times by college degrees, necessarily on the engineering front, first of all, and we filter because on that college degree, it's like the gentleman said, first of all, that you have the persistence to pursue that degree to the finish, to get the piece of paper. It seems that a lot of times if you go down, the lower you go on the degree scale, the more likely you are to have, it's just an indicator of commitment, of perseverance, and the ability to do a certain level of cognitive thinking, if you follow what I'm saying. And there are plenty of people who never got a college degree who are geniuses. And you'll find those occasionally, and you want to pick them up if you can. But we're talking about the statistical odds here, and you just have to filter on some criteria, and you find that works pretty effectively.
Thanks. Let's move on. I want to talk about resumes.
Oh, you're going to kill it?
You got more to say? If you really want to say something. Go ahead.
My wife is an attorney, and when she was going through the crazy, stressful time of working on passing the bar, there was a reassuring phrase that got repeated over and over. Do you know what they call the person that got a D on the bar exam? A lawyer. Next day, after you've gotten the most phenomenal grade ever on the bar, or if you just barely squeaked by 1 or 2 points, you're still a lawyer. And to me, the college degrees run along those exact same lines. With my personal experiences, I've seen almost the exact opposite when it comes to, maybe not so much as junior developers without a degree, but especially once you start getting into the mid-level and senior level developers that don't have a degree, because since they don't have a degree, they've had to work so much extra hard to succeed that it almost hardens them, tempers them, makes them an even better developer.
One quick thing too about that is, you know, like you mentioned when you're in college, you take a lot of those classes regardless of what your degree is in, that you think, okay, why do I need to know astronomy or whatever the case may be. I think everyone who's here, they're here to learn, and just, it's a life experience. The more you learn, the better off you are regardless of what it is. So you just got to take it for what it's worth. No one's better than anyone else. No one's going to be a better developer because this sheet of paper or that one. It's really how you present yourself and what you're willing to do. It's kind of like a cert. It's not going to hurt you. It's a good thing, but I personally would never hold it against anyone because they didn't have a certain degree or certification or anything like that. We can usually convince most of our clients that, you know, they're making a bad decision if they just go on that.
I did want to say real quick, I do have some comments.
All right, John. Good.
Do you think that it's possible that we are having this discussion about college degrees, whether they're good or not, is because that the college degrees don't really prepare us adequately for our jobs?
100% true.
I think that's a whole nother topic in
Yeah.
itself. I mean, I think all of us are obviously in agreement with that if you have a comp sci degree, you're not being prepared for the business role. Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to make my one opinion on this is that college, the purpose of college, there's a myth in this country that the purpose of college is to train you for a specific job, and that is not true. The purpose of college is to train you how to think and to provide some evidence that you can complete something that you started. If you have a college degree, you've shown evidence of those two things. And that's it. And that's not, there's value in that.
But isn't
That's
the
right.
responsibility of a college degree both? Because if it was just to teach you to have the ability to learn, ability to think, why do we have different majors in our college programs? Those individual, college as a whole, I agree, is responsible for teaching how to think and how to learn, but the individual degrees, specialized collegiate programs, do need to give you some sort of business value. And I do, to go a little bit back to Jeff's point from earlier, particularly in the computer science world, I think that across the board nationally, the programs are not really accurate for what we need to do. With Jeff, it was about the ability to communicate. Most computer science programs, at least from my observances, don't have a whole lot of exposure to public speaking or to how to write well instead of just writing good. And that's a recommendation that I have for anybody in their continuing education, beyond just going and learning about the latest developments in C# 4, taking up some writing classes, or even just going down to your local bookstore or onto Amazon. Getting a copy of Strunk and White's Elements of Style is a great book to get started at, to at least learn the basics of how to properly use a semicolon versus just at the end of a line of C#.
I think it boils down to is why do you have to write accessible HTML code? Because JAWS requires you to. It's just the way that it is, and that's the way that the world is. Most people require you to have a degree. Can we turn the battleship? Probably not. Can we do it in our own environments when we have the choice to hire? Yeah, but in big corporations, probably not.
But what if your degree was from 20 years ago and that didn't even exist? That doesn't mean you're not a good developer.
How many people in this room have comp sci degrees? Okay, history degrees, accounting. I know a lot of developers that don't have any degree at all whatsoever to do with computer science at all.
Business.
Business, there you go. What was it?
Chemistry.
Chemistry. Yeah, that really prepares you for code, right?
I was poli-sci.
See, so, you know, it's just one of those things. I think, you know, developers are, it's a breed of person, it's a mentality, and certain people fall in those roles and they just love it. So you don't necessarily get that from college. So.
All right, well, we got about half an hour left. I want to hit a couple more topics here. So, can we
It's hard for us to close down. We're a bunch of opinionated people.
I want to talk about. I just want to talk about resumes. Do I need a resume first of all? You guys?
Yes.
Okay. What goes into a good resume? I've seen. I don't know about you guys. I've seen crappy resumes. I've seen really, really, really bad resumes.
Okay, can I talk about this? I'm
Yeah.
gonna tell this. I told this to some guys on my team the other day. Several years back, a long time ago, I don't even want to say how many years, I got a resume from a guy that was written entirely in third person. It was Caleb wrote this application, did all these different technologies. Caleb accomplished this sort of thing.
Did he have a degree?
I remember Caleb's name a long time later, but he did not get the job because it stuck out so bad it just jumped right into everybody, and they're like, who wrote this? Who writes about themselves like this in a resume?
I got you beat. I got a resume once in all caps, which was not good, but he had a cover letter, and he listed his hobbies, which were hunting, fishing, and pretty ladies. And I'm just like, if we hire this guy, you better double the legal team, because we're going to be defending sexual harassment suits left and right.
I would guess with resumes, the questions that often come up are how long should it be and what should I list? You know, do you list Microsoft Office as a skill, for instance, in your resume? Do you put every job and everything you've ever done? And I think it depends a bit on where you're coming from in your career, and obviously with recruiting advice at the panel here, she'll have the most expert opinion from that perspective. But even within hiring in our own environment, if you're coming out of college, you don't have a lot of years experience, 1 page is sufficient, because I don't want to spend a lot of time reading through a long document. You probably don't have enough to fill it anyway, and my goal is to look through a stack of resumes, find the ones that stand out so that you get to the next level of actually talking to you and going through the interview process. The resume is just your first ticket to get noticed and to highlight what your skills are that are relevant to what I'm looking for, and then we pursue from there. So it doesn't need to be a novel. In fact, if it's a novel, it'll probably get trashed, because that represents you don't understand the limits on my time looking for a new candidate. If you're an experienced hire, if you have years of experience, 1 to 2 pages, I've heard 3, sometimes max, depending on the length of experience you have is appropriate. That's sort of the target for length. For skills, depends on the job you're applying for, but definitely developer jobs, it's unnecessary to list things that you should know. If it's Microsoft Office or things like this, just basic computer skills, it almost looks, I would say actually, definitely looks more poor on you if you do use it versus not listing it. List things that you actually have done work with, not things you read a book on, because that's going to help us as we move on, to expect to be able to quiz you on those things in the additional interview process. But that would be my two prongs on interview length, or rather resume length and resume content. Let's put that together. Definitely have that.
I would say that your resume as a developer is a website. You have everything on there. You're not limited to 3 pages, 2 pages. You put everything that you've ever done on that website, and if you feel it's important to put Office on there, then you put it on there. If you don't, you don't. It's that website. Physical piece of paper, a doc file, whatever. I usually keep those at one page, because I put a link at the very top. This is my website. Go here if you want to know about me. You're going to Google me anyway. Go here and you can find out all the information that you want. It doesn't need to be that many things, just to get your foot in the door.
I like that idea because it's also searchable. And one of the things I hate when I have 30 resumes in front of me is this death by resume, where I have to go through 100 pages and I'm only looking for really, has they worked with this, how they work with that. Keep it short. You don't need to write the Great American Novel. If I list interest in your resume halfway through the first page, you're probably not getting called for an interview. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of studies done on resumes, and typically, if someone spends 30 to 45 seconds on your resume, then you've got them hooked. If you don't get them in the first 30 to 45 seconds, they're moving on. So you do need to put the most important information, and I can't tell you what the most important information is, because it's what you're looking to do. But a long, drawn-out objective of, I want to maximize your, company's growth or whatever, that kind of stuff you can leave out. But the skills that are the most important to you, you don't have to list all the way back to when you use Pascal or whatever. The things that you're doing now that you want to do. Don't make yourself an expert in something if that's not what you want to do, because those are the only calls you're going to get. If you don't want to work with a certain technology, I'm not saying don't put it on your resume, but don't highlight it. Bring out, try to highlight the projects you've done that you were the most interested in, that were the most successful, and that you'd like to repeat again. Because then you're more likely to find a job doing just that.
And I'd add just 2 more points here. Know the company that you're sending that resume to. Just as when you go to an interview, and you should have done your homework to know who that company is and what they do. Know what they do before you hand them your resume, and tweak the resume for them. So if you're applying to Telerik, don't put your Java skills on there, because it means you probably didn't spend a lot of time looking into what we do as a business. Or at least don't put them first. List the skills that are most relevant to the job you're applying for. And second, to add, the details matter. These guys mentioned bad resumes, and one of the first things he mentioned was it was in all caps. Regardless of the content of what was actually in there, laying it out in a nice way, in a traditional way, making sure those details have been precisely massaged, is more important than you might think. And I would encourage you, while I think the online website is a good idea for additional detail, don't get too cute or too clever with your resume, because there's an expected amount of what a resume should look like. And if it gets too far out of that norm, unless it's adding value, then it's more likely making you think you didn't put enough effort in, or you didn't take the time to take this seriously, and it's going to get tossed with the other bad resumes. So it's something to consider before you get too out of the box.
Real quick, one more thing to add to that is a lot of companies have done this new thing now where they're scanning resumes and putting them into an online database. If your resume is a really, really bizarre format and their program can't figure it out and add it to the database, you're probably not getting called for an interview.
One of the most important things with a resume, don't lie on it. Because a lot of people lie on it. And I've seen people come in and interview people that have managed this team, managed all this stuff. I was the team lead, I was the project lead. And I asked about those bullets, and I was like, oh, well, tell me about that. Tell me, how many people are on the team? How many people were you leading? What were you doing? And, well, it was me and another guy, and we were coding on this thing, and, I was responsible for this part, he was responsible for that part. I'm like, well, where's the leadership in that? Where's the management in that? You can't claim you were a leader if you weren't really leading anybody. You're leading yourself. So there's a lot of people that take that, what they call it creative, whatever you want to call it, creative flair, and stick it in there, and what it is, it's a lie. And that's your profession on paper. So you're giving someone and saying, this is me, you want to hire me, why? And you're going to put something like that on there. You might as well just say, please don't hire me. Or, I'm only going to be here for 6 months, because you're going to know that I'm a liar as soon as I get the job and I'm here for 6 months. So always be honest on your resume. Don't list things that you didn't really do. But also, as developers, people want to know what kind of systems you built. So telling someone, I built this kind of application, that tells us, okay, you've got SOA on there, so you actually worked with services. You've got some background with these things. Versus saying, well, I built a website. That sort of stuff. If you can give them the business dynamic of what you built, I don't know if everybody would agree with that, but if you give them the business dynamic of what you built and actually throw in a few keywords of the technologies used, that's more valuable than just having, the language listed in skills at the bottom. They'll look at that, but if you have it embedded within the bullets, they can see, oh, you built a, customer relationship management tool with, using all these different services that were built within the organization. That tells them a lot about what kind of developer you are, at least your experience. So.
For me, two things that I like to see in a resume. One, to go back to an earlier point, a little bit of design inside of the resume. I don't like to see a resume that's all just one consistent, same font size, same font weight all throughout the resume. We wouldn't do that when we're designing a website. We want to make a website that's skimmable so that you can easily identify the headline of an article or some feature point in an article. We'll put it inside a bold tag. Don't be afraid to use those inside your resume. Me as a responsible for hiring you, it allows me to very quickly scan that information, and then when we have let's say a paragraph about that particular position description, if the bold headline of that position description catches my eye, then I can take the time to look into that a little more. And that's not just to say that only the headlines are bold. Maybe part of the details about you at this last position is you put in some performance optimizations that save the company $1 million every year. Feel free to just bold that 3 or 4 words inside of a sentence, inside of the paragraph. That'll catch my eye, and then I'll go in and read the full paragraph to find out more details. The second thing, beyond the design, that needs to go into a resume is spell check. You'd be surprised at the number of resumes that I see that have poor spell check. And of course, that's not just fixing whatever gets the red squiggly in Microsoft Word, because in this industry, Microsoft Word doesn't know about most of the words, especially the acronyms that we have in our industry. So make sure that you fine-tooth comb, proofread your resume, and then when you're done with that, give it to one of your buddies, because you are so in love with this resume, you're so close to that resume that it's very easy for you to miss, that you put WFC instead of WCF, and one of your cohorts, one of your buddies can help identify those mistakes.
Been trying to figure out how to work this one in here, but I guess it's going to be off of John's dishonesty and kind of your resume and how long it should be. boy, source code. Source code is part of your resume, like if it's on a website, but bringing it to the job interview is not. I had a woman who printed off an application that she wrote, and it literally was 2 binds of paper. It was huge. So I kind of humored her, opened it up and said, okay, well, can you tell me about this method right here? And then she came out and said, well, I really didn't write this. I printed it out. And I thought that was pretty good.
The job?
Yeah.
Printing job?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then more so with, to touch on what Jay was saying, it's different hiring designers versus developers. Working in a creative field now, I'm learning a lot of different things, and my business partner mainly deals with all the designers in that, but we were looking at somebody that we really liked. They were solid with things, but design is so subjective that it wasn't a good fit because his design didn't fit with her, what she thought, and we were very apologetic. We said, you're a great designer, you do things that are very nice, but we don't think you're a good fit here. So it's very subjective, and bringing portfolio pieces to an interview, even if you're just a web developer, and if you have somebody else design it, saying, somebody else designed this, but I implemented the HTML and CSS on that goes a long way, definitely.
One thing to add to John's don't lie is, it's a small world, and if you say you were this position or did this company, you never know who that hiring person knows. And I've had situations where I've caught somebody just in flat out lies, and that's very bad. It's embarrassing for the candidate, obviously. They clearly, at that point, have broken my trust and will never consider for another position ever again. And to be honest, that kind of thing is going to get around, especially in a smaller community. So you want to always make sure you're being completely honest and never go there.
So, couple more things. Jay earlier mentioned he's always on the job search, right? You should always be keeping your resume up to date because you're not going to be able to remember the details of every project you do over time. There's great ways to do that. You can just keep it all in a Word doc and keep it on, resume on your desktop, or you can use something like LinkedIn. There's a variety of ways you can keep your information up to date so that you can just pull those things. You may not have the resume already written, but you'll have all the important information there to where you can pull that stuff. So that can be really valuable. If you're doing it all the time, if you're always thinking about those things, you'll have it when you need it.
I want to add one more point to the don't lie thread. That doesn't just apply to what you say in an interview or what you put on your resume, but that also applies to your code. Last summer, we had a candidate that listed his portfolio, his website, right on the top of the resume, like many of us have. Went to his website. It was a fantastic looking website. It was great. We used lots of cool jQuery tools and whatever else. Really fantastically laid out. You could tell that it was professionally designed. Wonder what the source code thing looked like. So looking through the source code, thumbing through the source code, I found that he had a Twitter JavaScript plugin that was pulling in a Twitter feed, but it wasn't displaying the Twitter feed information anywhere on his page. And a little more digging, that Twitter feed was pulling in someone else's Twitter handle, not theirs. Follow the line of where this goes, go to that person's Twitter feed handle, that they list their portfolio on their Twitter profile. There's basically the exact same web page all over again, with a few, name change to who actually wrote the website instead of this other person that essentially copy-pasted the source code and commented out, I don't know what this Twitter thing is or what it does.
Going a little bit further on the honesty thing, I think too something that everyone needs to remember, we were talking about when it's time to make a job change, and you should really know if you wake up, you really don't want to go to work, or you get there and you're not happy on a regular basis, it's time. And I would say that's really true because when you leave a job, the only thing you leave behind and the only thing you take with you is your reputation. And like myself, Nashville's a very small town in general. You may not all be from here, but I've been in the IT field for 18 years. There aren't too many people I can't call and find out something about someone else who's in IT. And as a recruiter, that comes not only from the candidate side, but also I have relationships in HR. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. Whatever you do, it follows you or stays with you. So just make sure as you are writing resumes and interviewing and talking about things that you are responsible for, that you're honest and upfront.
Good comment from another troublemaker.
Yeah, last year I was engaged in a job search, and what I did was I had 3 versions of my resume, and the only difference between them was I put in a single recommendation that I got through LinkedIn. For one of them, I solicited my own company, a program manager, to write me a recommendation. So if I could figure out that where I was sending the resume that was a manager, I was going to send him, hey, I've interacted with management too. Another one was somebody else within the company that was effectively my client. So I could, this version demonstrates, hey, I get good feedback from my clients. And the third one, there was a particular company that I happened to be very interested in working for, and I knew somebody inside the company, and I asked him to write me a commendation. So that's the one I sent to them, and actually that's the company I got hired with.
Sure, and that works real well. Then you have to keep in mind too, that not just recruiters, but also hiring managers, they understand that, LinkedIn is out there, Facebook, all that stuff. And you're gonna get Googled. People are gonna look you up on Facebook to see if you're drinking a beer and, partying on your profile picture. So, keep that stuff in mind too. It's not just what you do at work, the way the social networking is nowadays, the things that you do in your personal life are, they're just as easy to find out as the things that you do professionally.
How many people in the room have Googled themselves? Yeah, because every employer will, right? Yeah, I've actually heard a lot about the LinkedIn recommendations because they do go back to someone, right? They can look at not only you, but they can say, oh, well, who recommended them and what's that person's history? Are they credible? So yeah, that's a great selling tool for building that network now so that you can get those recommendations over the history of your career and people can go out there and find those in Google. Yeah, you definitely want to know how far up on Google you are.
So on Google's going to bring back a lot of your social media sites. Someone else just asked, what do you as employers use social media to find candidates, and as employees do you use that to find prospective employers?
Twitter and Facebook great for that.
I want to add one thing on the LinkedIn recommendations though. Don't go and solicit your entire company at the same time for recommendations. One thing I look for in hiring is it's great if you have 20 recommendations on your LinkedIn profile, but if all 20 of those recommendations fall within about a 2-week span, then it's very obvious to me that you were just going and soliciting recommendations, pulling those from your colleagues, and how genuine they are did come into question. So, and that's not to say that it's bad to solicit recommendations from colleagues and managers and whatnot, but just don't mass spam all of your associates to solicit recommendations at the same time.
What I think is interesting about that, and trying to make this as practical as possible, because I know you guys listening to us, we're just giving out a lot of advice, some of you probably heard before, so what is really practical out of this? And from my perspective, one of the things that underscores is this idea that the process of looking for the next job, the process of being a good job candidate is continuous. You can't just become stale in your current position, and then once you need to find the next position, get everything freshened up, or clean up all your online references, or find all of your LinkedIn recommendations. Even if you're not looking for the next job, you're completely happy where you are, and you don't even intend to change jobs down the road, the need to keep your professional profile, your career profile, clean on the web, clean in your resume, is very important, because when it comes time, if that time comes, sometimes unpredictably, it's going to be very difficult. It can be done, but very difficult to run and catch up on that. Some of these things just do take time, and when done in a rushed format, that comes through. So that's one thing I think you can walk out your day if you're not doing that, and start actively doing that, keeping these things refreshed. And sort of along these lines, we're talking about red flags start to stick out to me. What are the things that I see red flags, and social media comes up into that? Every person I've hired, I have spent time looking for them on Facebook and trying to find some way to read their profile on Facebook if I'm not directly connected. LinkedIn, Twitter, Google, whatever it is, I want to know as much about them going into the interview as possible. Not to necessarily screen them out, but so that I have things in the back of my head that I need to kind of dig in a certain direction for to find out if I have concerns. Can those be put to rest by asking the right questions in an interview? So it's definitely happening. I do it every time. And I would say that's one of the major red flags to watch for, is if you have an online profile in any of these places, even if you think it's just for your friends, make sure that what's there is, I hate to say it, censored at all, but frankly, if you want to have that, if you want to have a good job search, keep it.
Never just for your friends.
It's never just for your friends, right? The internet's always public use. But some people take this very hard stance. It's my personal space. I should be able to do there what I want to do, personally. Well, if you do, just understand that could hurt your job, your job search. The last thing, I really will be my last thing here. Red flags wise, if you change jobs often, if you're the kind of person who can't stay in one place very long, if you bounce from job to job every 9 months, or maybe you're a contractor and you list the different contracts you've done, for me that can raise some red flags, because if I'm going to hire you and invest in you and want you to be a commitment to the company, seeing that bouncing would be a challenge. That's another red flag that you often have to try to counteract in the interview, or perhaps list things more importantly about why you moved from position to position. It's a little off topic, but I'm going to put that out there because the red flags came to my mind, and that's one of the ones that I actively look for and have to try to deal with in the interview.
Just to kind of add on to the whole, it's my space, it shouldn't matter. If you go out and get drunk and get arrested for drunk and disorderly, well, technically you're not at work either, but now you have a criminal record, and it's really hard to hire you too. So there's really no hard black line. Your public, or rather how you conduct yourself in your life, is going to be an indication of how you're going to be as an employee. So you really need to be mindful of that as well.
We have about 10 minutes left, and I don't want to end up without talking about the interview process itself. How can I, as a candidate, prepare for a job interview?
I've been waiting this whole time for this question. Yeah, just to work this one in. I asked somebody a softball question. So, what do you like to do in your free time? And it was a younger kid, and he said, "I like to play video games." Okay, what kind of video games do you like? I'm a big fan of Grand Theft Auto. Okay, what do you like about Grand Theft Auto? I like to kill hookers.
Who doesn't?
Not a good answer.
In an interview. How awesome is that? At least the guy. Did you hire him? What's that? Did you hire him? No, absolutely. It was not him. No. But yeah, I think it's being yourself. Even though that young gentleman was being himself, it was a little bit too much. Interviews that we conduct are very light. A lot of times there'll be multiple people in on an interview. Sometimes we'll do it over lunch. We're a casual company. We don't wear suit and tie all the time. So if you come to an interview, I kind of do want you to wear a suit and tie, just to assume that, because we do go to clients, but I do assume that. And we just ask questions, and a lot of the questions revolve around you and yourself. We are not only hiring you to work for us, we're hiring you to be our friend. We spend more time with you than we do our spouses a lot of times. So getting along with you is very important. So a lot of our questions revolve around that. Are we going to get along with you? That sort of thing. And one thing as interviewers that we want to do is strive to make you comfortable. And the worst thing we want to do is make you cry in an interview.
Well, I'll do that. Well, one thing I would say for an interview is you got to be professional, but be yourself. Don't try to pretend you're somebody else. Because 6 months down the road, if you do get hired, it's going to come out, and either you're going to be trying to be this other person still, and you're going to be miserable, or you're going to start being yourself, and everybody else is going to be miserable. And the crying thing's over.
Also, remember, when you go to an interview, you're interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you. So you better have questions. And if they ask really bad questions in the interview, that is usually an indicator that you don't want to work there. Okay? So you need to be thinking not just, I need this job, and I want to work, so therefore I'm going to come here. You've got to proactively ask questions. What's your development process? What do you do? How do you deal with this? What do you like about this company? And you've got to know that there's going to be some of that, oh, well, I love the company and all that kind of stuff, when they may not. But you really should be looking for just those little things that tell you, don't come here, right? Because if everybody's like, well, we work all the time, and, you know, we work a lot of hard weekends and stuff like that, but the payoff's great. You know, if that's what you want, wonderful. But more than likely, nobody wants to work 80-hour weeks. Maybe some do. I know James is big on 80-hour weeks, right? But, you know, just remember, you're there to not only get a job for yourself, but to make sure that that company is right for you. So make sure you ask all the right questions.
Make sure that you're prepared for the interview. I have every single interview on 2 unsaid questions. Question 1 is, can you find the place? Lots of companies are hard to find their office. Google can't always get you there exactly. So if you are showing up 5 minutes late, oh, I had trouble finding the place, it shows me that you didn't prepare. You didn't take the time ahead of time to either figure out where you needed to go or leave your home, wherever you're coming from, with enough time to factor in for traffic jams or that, you know, hey, I don't know where I'm going. question 2 is bringing a copy of your resume. I will always review your resume for about 10 minutes or so before the interview so that I'm prepared to ask you questions that are relevant to you and your position. I will always leave that resume at my desk. And when I get into the interview, I will ask you for a copy of your resume. Because that, one, shows me, again, that you were prepared, that you thought ahead to print out copies of your resume. And also, as an added bonus, many times resumes, particularly coming through recruiting companies, the resumes have been reformatted somewhat, if nothing else, than to get the recruiting company's logo at the top. And I'd like to see your raw resume with your spelling errors on it, and at the same time, your design features of that resume. And I'd like to see what it is that you create.
I would say the biggest thing is, I'll go along with what John said, be yourself and be honest. And when I say be honest, I'm not talking about telling lies. I mean, if someone says, are you open to overtime? You know, oh yeah, I'll do whatever it takes to get the job done. You know, give them specifics. I don't mind working extra hours if it's if we're working on a project and there's a time crunch. Or I understand that in IT, a normal work week is 45, 50 hours a week, but, don't commit to, I'm there, day and night, it doesn't matter. Same thing with travel. If you don't want to travel, tell them up front. Because the last thing you want to do is get in a situation where you're not home when you need to be, and then you're stuck, you can't find a job because you're always on the road. So think about your personal whys of changing jobs, the kind of job you want, how it affects your personal life, your family life. It's not just you that it affects, it's everyone that lives in your home, whether it's wife, children, other family members, and keep all of that in mind.
One thing, we haven't talked about the technical interview yet, but one thing I do want to say about that is, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. There's a lot of frameworks, a lot of platforms, a lot of language features. Nobody is an expert in all of them, but we're going to ask you about a lot of things just because we want to find out where your skills are. We don't expect you to know answer every question. But when you try to kind of BS it, we can, even if we don't know the technology, we can tell you're BSing because your body language changes and you get flustered and you'll talk for 5 minutes and it's like watching an airplane circle that never actually lands. And that's worse than just saying, I don't know. So don't be afraid to say that. We're not going to ding you if you don't know this really obscure corner of this really weird framework.
We have an audience comment.
Based on questions about developers or candidates being honest, a lot of times some of the companies aren't necessarily as honest about the situations. Would any of you people who are hiring developers be offended if you, as a candidate, asked if you could talk to some of your potential coworkers? Sometimes developers are going to be more honest to developers than,
We encourage it.
Yeah.
So one of the key things about an interview, and this really goes to companies that don't know how to interview. The most important thing that a company should realize is they're not hiring a plug-and-play person that, oh, you've got all these technical skills, therefore I can just throw you in a team and it'll work. You should include the team in the interview. You're trying to find out, and you made an excellent point, you're trying to find out if this person's going to work with this team. You're going to spend a lot of time with these people. You've got to make sure they're going to be a good fit. That is extremely important in picking someone in an interview. And too many companies miss that. They think it's just a sit down, ask a bunch of technical questions, and I can determine what kind of skills you have and whether you're going to work at the company. Maybe in a company where everybody's just a number, but for the people that are going to have to work with you, that's not going to work. So
Just extending on this, when looking at the interviews, what we're looking for often are these things that are more about personality than actual technical skills. Would you fit the company culture? Would you fit the way we operate? Are you asking intelligent questions? I think John listed some good questions, but the one question, I'm not sure you said this, but I thought I heard you say it. Never ask, what do you do? Because that is to the idea of preparation. That shows that you didn't even spend the most basic amount of time trying to understand our business. If you don't understand something specific about what they do, ask a intelligent, specific question, but never ask these blanket questions because they come across as very, very poorly thought out, and for me, it almost end an interview instantly if they're asked. Beyond that, I think that everything has been highlighted here as well. Not looking for your actual ability to write code. We assume that at a certain level. And I would say, just to take this to the next level, an interview will maybe get you a job, but that is not a marriage. And sometimes the interview process doesn't work out. And you do make a decision that ultimately, because things are obscure, everybody's got their own angle coming into this, you just don't make the best decision. Don't be afraid to admit that. down the road 6 months or 9 months. If you make the wrong decision, do it again and find a better job. This is not a fixed decision that you have to live with the rest of your life.
From a recruiting standpoint, I will always tell candidates the good, bad, and the ugly about the company, because I don't have any perfect clients, just like there aren't too many perfect candidates out there. And if you're interviewing with any company and they're not telling you some of the things that they need to improve upon and they need to work on, then you need to spend your time outside researching. Get on LinkedIn, find some people out there that work for that company. Call them up, connect with them on LinkedIn. They're going to answer your questions. Because if anything, they want people coming to work for that company that are going to fit in and be helpful and help them get where they want to be and maybe overcome some of that stuff.
All right, we're just about out of time. Sorry to cut you off. We have about 1 minute left. I want to get final thoughts, starting with John here. And before I go, though, those people in the audience, we really appreciate your questions. We have a little gift for you here. It's a 30-day subscription to TechPub online training. Come on up here and I'll give one to you. John?
Well, I think, again, be honest and all that sort of thing. And the one key thing I would tell you in an interview with me and a lot of other people, if somebody asks you to rate yourself, you better not say 10. Because somebody's going to get a book out and they're going to shut you down. Because I don't care how smart you are, you're not a 10. So remember that.
All interviewers are going to be different when you're going into things. Every interview is going to be different. James is going to ask different questions than me. And one thing that I strive to do is when you leave an interview with me, you will always have a warm, fuzzy feeling walking out of there because it's our company's reputation. We want you going around preaching the word of our company. Hey, this company was a great interview, blah, 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 blah. You won't get that at all places. I'll throw you softballs if I see an interview's going very poorly. You're not going to get that at all places. So just prepare and just do your homework about companies and just relax and be yourself. That's the big thing.
From a recruiting standpoint, I would say research the companies that you're going to work with. Make sure you find those companies that are going to work ethically and professionally for you because you are technically their client on the candidate side. And just make sure that you're not working with every recruiting firm in the city because that's not going to do you any good. You need to build that relationship with a few that you can trust. They're going to get to know you and trust you, and it'll make for a much smoother transition.
Remember that throughout your entire career, regardless of any companies that you work for, whether it's Sofic or Sergetti or Gravity Works or Rana Software, you don't work for any of those companies. You work for you. I work for, effectively, J. Harris Incorporated. Everything I do is my own personal brand. Every interview that I go in as a candidate, I'm reflecting my own personal brand. Every interview that candidates are coming to me as the employer, sort of what Jeff said, it's reflecting my personal brand. And that goes along with your resumes, with your website, with the source code that you write. Everything that you do throughout your entire career, you are an employee of you.
I think to the central question of this panel, how do you find a job? If you could walk out of here with anything, and that's actually practical, that is start the process today. Not necessarily going out and handing out interviews or looking to change jobs, but the things we've talked about that need to be maintained, that take time, the networking, the LinkedIn recommendations, whatever it is that takes time to build up this representation of your career profile, start doing that today and do it continuously going forward. And since you are at DevLink, and this happens to be a great environment, get involved in the open spaces. Come to